Today is Wednesday, January 29th, and today I'll tell you what I'd do if I were running the Cowboys.
And now, a word from our title sponsor.
Eyeing retirement? Let us show you how to turn your nest egg into a paycheck with half the amount you've been led to believe. Fluent Financial combines in-house portfolio design and risk management with income-generating investments designed to accelerate your financial independence. Let us develop an effective portfolio strategy that works for you so you can retire sooner and have a better lifestyle. Fluent Financial can also implement a program that allows business owners to install a cash balance plan, which is designed to help drastically reduce income tax payments. You've worked hard to become successful. Let us develop an effective portfolio strategy that works for you. Learn more today about Fluent Financial. Retire sooner, better lifestyle. For more information or to schedule a meeting, visit fluentfinancial.com or call 972-852-4800.
At the press conference introducing Brian Schottenheimer as the new head coach of the Cowboys, Jerry called it, quote, as big a risk as you can take. Pardon me, but isn't that dissing your coach right in front of him? He's the biggest risk you could take? But maybe that's just a phrase and this year's version of we're all in. Now that Schottenheimer has been named the head coach, we'll get to a couple of housekeeping items and then what I do with the Cowboys. He has added Matt Eberflus as the defensive coordinator. Eberflus was here for several years coaching linebackers, left to coach the Indianapolis defense, then the head coach of the Bears. This is a good add. Mike Zimmer, who stepped in last year as defensive coordinator, apparently will retire. The team, though, has lost excellent defensive secondary coach Al Harris to Ben Johnson's new staff in Chicago. And special teams coach John Bones Fossil was quickly scooped up by Tennessee. I know that some fans were unhappy with Fossil this year for two fake punts that went awry. Well, first, one of them he didn't call. Punter Brian Anger, who has that right when he sees a certain situation, called that one, and that was a mistake. And before we think, well, Fossil was just, a reminder, it was John Bones Fossil who found kicker Brandon Aubrey, who is maybe the best kicker in the NFL now, and a multiple Pro Bowler. And it was Fossil who took Cavante Turpin out of the Spring Football League and turned him into the best and most feared returner in the NFL. Also a multi-time Pro Bowler. And while Fossil was here the last 4 years, he had punter Brian Anger. In none of those 4 years did Anger average less than 48 yards a kick. And he also has a Pro Bowl to his name. There's one head coaching vacancy left, the New Orleans Saints. And Vegas, who puts odds on anything, has made the favorite to get that job Coach Big Mac, Mike McCarthy. Though, hold on, right after Philadelphia laid 55 points on Washington in the NFC Championship game on Sunday, the Saints brass flew to Philadelphia to talk to Kellen Moore this week. And one more thing about that big Philadelphia win, they had 7 rushing touchdowns. 7. All-time record. 7 rushing touchdowns. That's one more than the Cowboys had all season this year. What a stat. Now, on to what I'd do if I were suddenly given free rein to run the Cowboys. First, I'd have a very private conversation with Dak that never goes public if the conversation never goes anywhere. I'd be asking Dak to give back some of the money. He is the highest paid quarterback in the league at $60 million a year. that is really hampering the Cowboys. I'd suggest to Dak, and it'd be totally his call, to give back maybe $7 million a year, drop to $53 million a year. That's enough to live on, and look like a hero in Dallas, and give the Cowboys some room to go sign players in free agency to help the club. And if Dak agreed to do that and announced it publicly, I'd go to C.D. Lamb and ask maybe if he'd consider giving back $2 million a year. And it's time to offer an extension to Micah Parsons. And you guessed it, I'd suggest to Micah that he publicly state he's taking a couple $1 million a year less to stay here in Dallas and help the team build a squad. I'd also make it plain to Micah Parsons that his off-season routine is going to change. In past years, Micah Parsons has not worked out in Dallas. Well, he's worked out on his own. While the club was having things like OTAs and mini camps, Micah was working out on his own. I'd make it plain to Micah that he's expected to be a leader on this club, and that he's expected to be here when the club assembles for things like mini camps and OTAs. And I'd make that part of his contract. I'd make it so that Micah would be paid every year for every mini camp and OTA he attended. He would be paid $200,000. But if he wishes to skip them, he can do so. He simply forfeits that money. And let's say Parsons, on a 5-year deal, misses 9 OTAs and mini camps a year. Well, that would be $9 million he would forfeit in potential bonus money. Hey, if you're going to be a leader on a football team, act like a leader on a football team. Next, I'd get right to work on free agency. Last year, this club was awful. You couldn't hear, you could hear sounds coming from the star. It was snoring, as other teams made loads of good additions, and the Cowboys signed one player, Eric Kendricks, the middle linebacker. And he was pretty good, by the way. I'd get right to work on a contract for defensive tackle Osa Odigizua, and for defensive tackle, defensive end Chauncey Golston, who also developed into a pretty solid rotational player. And I'd get to work getting Jordan Lewis' signature on a contract. Those three are important to the defense, and you've got to keep them away from Dan Quinn, and maybe away from Mike McCarthy if he gets the New Orleans job. Lewis is especially important in light of the news on Trayvon Diggs. The cornerback just had really complicated right knee surgery, and there's no assurance he'll be ready for opening day. Whoa. If Diggs isn't ready and you've lost Lewis, that secondary has a very shaky look. Next, I'd move last year's number 1 draft choice Tyler Guyton to guard. He struggled to tackle. He drew all sorts of penalties. And I've said this about 4 or 5 times before on Just Wondering. Last year at the draft, the people I talked to, several suggested Tyler Guyton should be a guard, not a tackle going forward. And by the way, you've got an opening at guard with Zach Martin potentially retiring. Crest Volvo has more than 200 brand new Volvos available, and inventory is arriving daily, including the XC40, XC60, and XC90. Drive into the world of Scandinavian luxury with the 2025 0.5 Volvo XC90. This just isn't refreshment, it's refinement. Volvo fine-tuned the hybrid system for even greater efficiency, improved fuel economy, and an extended pure electric driving range. perfect for city commutes or weekend getaways. Make a visit to Crest Volvo Cars to test drive one today. Off Highway 121 on the Tollway in Frisco or online at crestvolvocars.com. Live your Crest life. For more than 3 decades, Bob's Steak and Chop House has remained an icon of DFW restaurants. Why? Well, maybe it's because of Bob. He's fanatical about cleanliness and friendliness, and his food, oh my Lord, his food. If you've been there, you know about it. If you haven't been there, you should know about it. The original Bob welcomes you at either of his 2 locations, Bob's on Lemon Avenue or the sparkling new Bob's at Craig Ranch, McKinney. I'd hit the ground running on free agency. Don't tell us how poor you are and you don't have cap room. Do it. Get to work on it. Create the cap room. Don't tell us how poor you are. Last year we saw all 17 games of the Cowboys, and we know how poor you are. This team needs offensive tackle depth. Speaking of which, how about re-signing Chuma Edoga? He's been a valuable guard tackle spare in his years here. I'd love bringing him back. Get some defensive tackle depth because while people say Mozzie Smith improved last year in his second year with the Cowboys, let me tell you, having looked at his first year with the Cowboys, improving would not have been very difficult. And with Kendricks now in free agency and DeMarvion Overshown missing the year with serious surgery, the Cowboys have a real need at linebacker. Now you can draft one, you can sign one, but you got to be adding some people at that position also. And you don't have to break the bank to sign some players. You're going to see Philadelphia in the Super Bowl. One of their best players on defense is a guy named Zach Baun. He was a free agent from the Baltimore Ravens. Now, with the Ravens, he was okay as an outside linebacker. But Philadelphia looked at him, and they thought, maybe he'll be something if we move him to an inside linebacker. And oh my goodness, were they correct. Zach Baun is one of the best defensive players in the NFL this year as an inside linebacker. And you know what he's costing the Eagles? Under $2 million a year base salary. You don't have to pay $15 million for a free agent. There are lots of players out there who can play, who will ask only modest wages. And I'd get right to work on a new deal for the head of the draft, Will McClay. Dallas has stayed afloat because McClay and his scouts have done a good job providing the talent for the Cowboys through the draft and through undrafted free agents. The Cowboys have a solid amount of those, some of them contributing mightily, like Rico Dowdle, who probably leaves to free agency. But McClay's contract is up after the April 24th to 26th draft. Losing him would be awful. Hey, this year, if I were running the Cowboys, I'd act with some urgency. And we saw no urgency all last season, despite the Cowboys telling us all, we're all in. Baloney. And I would urge you, Cowboy fans, if the Cowboys don't show some urgency this offseason, maybe there's other things you could use that money for than tickets and $12 beers and $100 parking spaces. And you know what I'm talking about.
Today's episode brought to you by Fluent Financial, Retire Sooner, Better Lifestyle. And by Crest Cars. There's good, There's better. And then there's Crest. And by Bob's Steak and Chop House.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Just Wondering with Norm Hitzges. If you enjoyed what you heard, please hit follow, and a fresh new episode will be delivered to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you know someone who might enjoy our work, please share it with them. I'm Norm Hitzges, and I'm always just wondering about something.
And I'm Mary Hitchkus, and I'm just wondering too.